Hello, I'm back. It is now the end of the week and I'm finally filming this video. It's been a whirlwind, you guys. I just got off of a wonderful weekend in Hollywood where they showcased my film at the TCL Chinese Theater, just right downtown in the hub of Hollywood Boulevard. It was such a fun experience. A few of my cast and crew were there and they got to see it. It was just amazing. I would highly suggest, even if you're not showcasing a film, go see a movie at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. It is so beautiful. It's such a fun experience. They have a huge IMAX unit down there. I think one of my crew members actually saw Oppenheimer there in the IMAX later on, but just a great place, just a very historic, fun area to hang out. I did not film it because I was just trying to kind of avoid all the hustle and bustle of people on City Walk, but truly a fun week, truly fun weekend. Now I am talking about fall books today. I've been thinking about this for a while because fall is my absolutely favorite season. My husband and I are both fall people. I have a list of recommended readings for you that I have read that I think have kind of like a fall cozy vibe. And I also have my fall TBR that I'm working on this season as well. I will be honest, I have been going through a little bit of a reading slump. I'm currently audiobooking the third book of the Glass and Steel series, but I've also been reading Brandon Sanderson's Elantris. It's a great read, but it's very long, so I'm looking forward to reading some of these shorter books. So first up are my recommended reading that I think have some fall vibe or just cozy aesthetics in general. And I've seen this one on a lot of people's lists. It is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I'm putting it here because this is a very recent read of mine. It's just a very cozy, like low fantasy adventure time travel with some historic elements put into place, a lot of going back and forth between historic periods. I really enjoyed it, especially if you like, how do you put it, what do I even call it? Like low fantasy or just like some real world fantastical elements. The next one is Jane Eyre. I read this one last winter actually, when I had COVID. I was really sick and I really enjoyed reading Jane Eyre. I love the movies. I finally sat down and read the book. Lovely read, beautiful, very kind of cozy gothic vibes, and there's a romance in there too. If you know anything about Jane Eyre, you know probably that much about it, but just a really good read. I really recommend. Very cozy, very nice. It is kind of a thicker book, but it's not crazy. It only took me like a week or two to get through it. Moving on to a shorter one is Frankenstein. I read this a couple years ago. It's kind of more that eerie gothic feeling. You truly kind of get inside the monster's mind. It's a good, interesting read. I was fascinated by it. I read this in like 2 days, maybe less. Very quick, a little bit of like a moody kind of October feeling, Halloween feeling book, but you don't want to commit to a longer novel. Frankenstein is a great place to start, and it's a classic. You cannot go wrong with a classic. Next is Raspberry Danish Murder. I forgot who this author was. I should have written it down and I didn't. Oh, Joanna Fluke. I will put pictures up here too. You've probably been seeing the pictures already. But Raspberry Danish Murder by Joanna Fluke. This was a cozy murder about two girls, I think sisters, that own a bake shop and one of their husbands goes missing. I've never read like a cozy murder mystery like that before. It was recommended to me by my friend and I really enjoyed it. I have not read another Joanna Fluke since, but I plan to. I think there's one called Pumpkin Spice Latte or Pumpkin Spice Murder that I was wanting to check out. This one was really cozy though. All the baking, just very fall vibes. You feel like that you're in the bakery with them. Really fun. Highly recommend. And next one is a bit of an adventure one, and I talked about this earlier on my channel. It's Morlock Night. It's one of the first steampunk novels that was ever officially written. It gives some of that monster vibes with the Morlocks coming after our main character. There's a bit of a mystery, and you even get to dive into the London sewers for a bit. So I just thought it was very Octoberish, very kind of like, you know, October, Halloween, like in London kind of feel, and then with that monster element. If you're in for kind of a steampunk adventure and you really liked Arcane, like I did, the Arcane series, I think this is a good one to check out. Up next on our list is this one's kind of obvious, like I put any of the Harry Potter books, but especially 1 and 2, because I think that in those first two, they have a Halloween party. Halloween night happens, I think, in the first book. And then the second book, you get to Nearly Headless Nick's Death Day party. So that was kind of Halloween-y, and plus like with Chamber of Secrets specifically, kind of monster element with the basilisk. If you're looking for something lighter and just more fun and adventurous, Harry Potter is always a great read. The next one is kind of like Raspberry Danish Murder, and you've probably heard of it, is Big Little Lies by Liana Moriarty. I forgot her name briefly for a second. I had so much fun reading this book. It is a mystery. There are some serious topics. It's a little bit gloomy and darker. It's about a bunch of moms at a school, and there's something not right. You may have also seen this series with Nicole Kidman and, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on everyone's name today. Reese Witherspoon. I really liked the book better, just a heads up, even though the series did have some good elements, but there's a mystery involved. It's kind of like a whodunit and a why and a how. So if you enjoy suburban kind of mysteries with a kind of a dark element to it, but there's also a lot of comedy in there. It's pretty light as far as that goes. Like, it's really fun. Like, I laughed at Leanne Moriarty's writing. If you're into that but don't want to go completely dark true crime, that's a good one. The next book on my recommended list is The Night Circus. I read this one a few years ago. It's really cozy and vibey. There's a circus in town. The author has a way of describing the atmosphere in such a pleasing way. It is not so plot heavy in my opinion, but it's a very beautiful read, and if you're wanting to get into that October kind of fall mood, definitely has the atmospheric element going for it. The next one up here is another classic. It's The Picture of Dorian Gray. I read this a few years ago as a buddy read with my now husband. So much like of that kind of creepy elements with certain aspects of the story. It's interesting. It's definitely gothic. And I just really like Oscar Wilde's writing. I definitely recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray if you haven't read it. There's some dense philosophical discussions in the beginning, just a heads up in this book, but the rest of the book keeps moving and a lot happens and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on, and like why, and what's gonna happen, and how are, you know, I don't want to give too much away. It's a classic. You might know the story, but definitely recommend. Even though it was written in, I think, the 1800s, the language is still very modern for both these classics that I'm recommending here, so don't be afraid. It's a good book. Next one is another kind of classic but more modern, written in I think the 1950s by one of my favorite authors, Ray Bradbury. It's Something Wicked This Way Comes. You might have heard this. This has also been referenced in a lot of, I think, media. But Something Wicked This Way Comes is about two young boys that discover, like the night circus, a circus comes to town and there's mystical things afoot. It's very Halloween-y. There's definitely something weird going on. I actually watched Halloween Town with my husband lately, the Disney Channel movie from way back in the day. After reading this book, I was like, there was a lot I think that they kind of took, I mean, loosely would have referenced Something Wicked This Way Comes, but it just kind of gave me the same feel. Serious vibes, some gothic horror elements, but it's not like too much. The next one is, again, the series that I'm audiobooking right now by CJ Archer. It's Glass and Steel. This is a very light kind of mystery romance read set in Victorian London. They're not long, they're very quick reads. You get like the mystery in London, our main character who's an English watchmaker and her companion who is an American outlaw. It's very light and I'm 3 books in. As far as like the romance goes, I think they've only like kissed once, but this one's very good. Just a light, fun, easy read, easy audiobook to listen to. So the next one, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like bending out of frame here to see what's on my list. Oh, anything by Randall Reinstedt. I have grown up in California. I'm from the Monterey Bay, and from a young age, I was really fascinated by Randall Reinstedt's historic kind of ghost retellings. It's basically California history with a little bit of like a gothic ghost story bent, and there's a lot of folklore elements put into it. He's most famous for his book Ghost Notes, so specifically if you've never heard of him, I recommend Ghost Notes. It's a good one for like a younger and older reader. He does write for both children and adults. This is definitely his like one of his adult reads. Very friendly. It's not, nothing's crazy in it, but if you're not into spooky things, this is probably not one for you. So the next one is another classic, Ghost Stories by Charles Dickens. I have this thick book on my shelf. He wrote a lot of short, creepy stories. I read the first few. Some of them are actually pretty humorous, like The Ghost in the Mail. If you're into classic literature or Victorian literature and you want a short story, it's a little bit of that spooky element, that's a good one to grab. Next one we have is We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I have not read The Haunting of Hill House yet, but I've read We've Always Lived in the Castle. This about 2 years ago. It's a really good book. It's a shorter read too. Something's going on, like it's a bit of a mystery element. There's these 2 sisters that live in this manor, and something's happened to the rest of the family and you don't know what or why quite yet. They have ideas, but it's just a little interesting kind of mystery. Next one is an adventure fantasy. It is, I think, technically an adult book. I don't think it's I gotta check. It might be YA, but the protagonist is 26 years old, and that's Black by Ted Decker. It's part of the Circle series by Ted Decker. Kind of a dystopian fantasy, a portal fantasy element is involved. Good choice for October because there are some darker things, parts of the book that make it, I think, more of a Halloween appropriate read. So now we have A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. This is a short story, or basically anything by Flannery O'Connor. I definitely do have a novel on my list that I want to read by her. She was a very prolific Southern Gothic writer, and this one was a darker kind of like shocking read, but it was really good. I think it's one of her most famous short stories. Next one is The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde, and it's just a funny read about a ghost that is kind of bad at scaring people, and they live in this giant English manor. So if you like ghosts in English manors in the English countryside and you like a bit of comedy, this is also a good Oscar Wilde read, and it's really short. The next one is a graphic novel. It's a bit darker. It's Sweet Tooth. My husband and I watched the show. There's definitely some graphic elements to this story. The graphic novel is, in my opinion, even darker than the show, so just be prepared for that. If you're a fan of The Walking Dead, I think you will like Sweet Tooth. Now, going still the graphic novel route with a less intense read is The Umbrella Academy. I read these years ago when I was a teen. I was a huge My Chemical Romance fan. I had them on PDFs years ago and really enjoyed them. It's definitely like, I think X-Men meets some gothic elements. I read Howl's Moving Castle a couple months ago. I've seen the Studio Ghibli film a lot. The book was really good. It's a little bit disjointed in parts. It's a magical kind of look into another world. It's very cozy. There's like hat shops and wizards, seaside towns. It's really cozy. Next one is another fantasy. We've got two more and they're both fantasy. Fantasties by George MacDonald, or I think anything by George MacDonald. There's definitely some weird, dark kind of other fairy realm aspects in the Fantasties specifically, and it reminded me a lot of like Halloween. Finally, we have Beren and Luthien by Tolkien. This is part of the Silmarillion lore. This one is written in prose and poetic verse. It's a lot like if you're reading Beowulf. If that's a little bit jarring for you, there are some parts that are very long verse, and at one point she turns into a vampire. So I thought that was kind of Halloween-y. Beren and Luthien is a good read if you love The Lord of the Rings and you're not ready to dive into the Silmarillion. It's a good little offshoot story of that world. Because I've been reading Elantris, I'm definitely ready for some shorter reads, some shorter kind of moody fall reads. So all these except for say two, I think, are on the shorter side for sure. It shouldn't take you long. These are not all of my fall reads at this point, and we'll see. I'll make another video talking about how my fall reads actually went, because I'm sure there may be a few that I change out depending on the mood. First one that I'm wanting to read is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I've been wanting to read this for a while, and I think Stardust too. I'm gonna put Stardust on there as well. I've seen the movie Stardust, but I've never finished the book, and I like Neil Gaiman, so it's kind of sad to say that I haven't read these two yet. Number 2 is Practical Magic. Again, seen the movie, never read the book, but I own it. I own all these books, by the way. I'm definitely trying to stick to my bookshelf this year too, except for say like, I think one. Oh no, we're good. I own all of these. The next one is Little Shop of Found Things by Paula Braxton. I found this one on Kindle randomly one day because I wanted like a low fantasy kind of in the shop, like candy shop kind of vibe, because the book that I'm writing, the main character owns a candy shop. So that one I'm looking forward to. This next one is a fuller novel. This is longer. Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor. Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, and also his short story collection I just got. Next one is some sci-fi. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Ever since I've read Morlock Knight, The Time Machine has been on my mind. Next one is Kari Mora by Thomas Harris, another author that I like. He wrote the Hannibal Lecter series. I still haven't finished the last Hannibal Lecter book, titled Hannibal, but the series was really good, and Kari Mora is a more recent and shorter book. The next one is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This one I may actually read first before Neverwhere. We also have A Clockwork Orange, a dystopian, on here. I've read parts of Clockwork Orange. I've never seen the movie. This is one that I've not seen the movie. It's a novella, so it's not long. I'm looking forward to getting through that. Next is Sleepy Hollow. Have seen the movie by Tim Burton. Haven't read the short story. And the last one is The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. He heavily inspired Neil Gaiman, and he was, I think, a Scottish writer. Because of all the Neil Gaiman on my list, I wanted to include The Man Who Was Thursday, and plus that one's just been on my TBR forever. So there you have it. Those are my 10 shortish reads for October. If you're curious, here are my bonus reads. The first one was Hannibal by Thomas Harris. Next one was Outline Your Novel for Success by Cam Weiland. She gives a lot of really good writing tips. I love her work. A few screenplays, one of them being Amelie. Haven't read the movie. Ever since I went to my film festival this weekend, I have been wanting to dive back into reading screenplays and watching classic movies. I've actually watched a bunch of classic movies this week while I worked. And then we have Solace by Gail Carriger, which is a more recently published steampunk novel. I think that was written like 2014, 2016. It's been on my list for over a year. And lastly, we have The Spider's Web by Agatha Christie. I'm gonna also put her down on my official TBR because I've been wanting to read an Agatha Christie for a while, since we are getting more into the October months. It's September, but you know what I mean, like it's getting to be fall. It's actually still warm here, full disclosure. I'm wearing shorts, so I'm hoping that next week or the next week or two it will cool down. Thank you for listening to me rant. Those are my 10 short-ish TBR list reads that I'm looking forward to reading this fall, and then I hope you enjoyed my recommended reading. If you have any comments about anything that you've read or you want to suggest something to me, let me know in the comments. And again, thank you so much. I will see you next time.